tremendous, wonderful, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious bastard. Jim, just told you. Look, there's some eagles. On is a memorial. The memorial that you see over here is to commemorate I told you we used to chase a lot of terrorists over here in this area, to commemorate some of the soldiers who were killed chasing those terrorists. And it's interesting when you go to any Israeli memorial, the soldiers are always listed according to alphabetical order, but many times there's also going to be the ranks. And if you look over there, you'll see that there's a very high number of the casualties are officers. In the fighting in 2014, the casualty rate, the fatality rate was 27% was officers. And the officers are a little bit more than 1% of the number of the soldiers. And there's a big deal in the Israeli army. I mentioned it once. The way I was trained is I am the first in line. And everybody is behind me. The first person to go is always going to be the officer. The soldiers know that there's nothing that the officers do, that they are going to be requested to do, that the officers do not do. What I used to do, particularly, was when we would go on a mission, I'd stand everybody around, and I'd say, okay, everybody pass their gear to the guy on the left. So, and check it. Just one last check, that somebody didn't make some mistake, and I would give my equipment to a private to check it, because once we're out there, we're all the same. My blood is just like his blood is. And one of the things that they always noticed was how much my gear weighed as compared to their gear. They took what they needed and what was the regulation. I took what I thought I needed, and which was way above the regulation, usually weighed twice as much as everybody else. And from that, they understood that I'm out there, my job is to take care of them and make sure that we have what we need in order to get what we need done. But there's a very high mortality rate, which is a problem. And as most armies do, this was set during a battle in the war of 1948. There was a place called the Castle, a castle that sits on top of a hill, and it changed hands numerous times between the Arab forces and the Jewish forces. In the end, the Jews get it. The commander of the Arab forces was a guy named Qadr Amin al-Husseini, who was like a mythical warrior. He was very esteemed within amongst the Palestinian people. And he was told by one of his officers that they control the castle, and he didn't seem right to him, so he decided that he's going to go check it out. The forces, which were the top-notch forces that captured the castle, this was an important site, got relieved by brand new recruits. And so they're protecting the castle because the battle's over already, and Qadr Amin al-Husseini comes to see what's going on. And the soldier who was on guard duty sees three people coming, Qadr Amin al-Husseini and two of his officers, and he yells out to them in Arabic, who goes there? Qadr Amin al-Husseini understands from the accent that they are not Arabs, so he responds in English, and he responds in English. So the soldier opens fire and kills Qadr Amin al-Husseini, wounds another one of the officers, and the third one doesn't get wounded. So the wounded one and the other one flee. And they collect the body of Qadr Amin al-Husseini, the Israeli troops, and they bring it to where they are. These are brand new recruits. They have no idea who this guy is. The other two officers do something that's called the fawza, which is a glorified yodeling, and they call all of the people from around the area to come in order to save. They thought that Qadr Amin al-Husseini was just wounded in order to save him from the Jews. And 5,000 irregular militias get gathered together and attack this hill where there's a bunch of new recruits. They radio back to their headquarters and they say that we're being attacked by a massive amount of people. And the soldiers that are there, which are mainly the officers in the command, the NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, who just finished capturing that place and are now planning the next battle, they drop what they're doing and they go to the hill to protect them. And the commander is a man named he's Lieutenant Shimon Ulfasi. He's 22 years old, and he gives an order that is going to be the defining order of the Israeli army from then onwards. And he says, all the privates will retreat, all the commanders will stand and defend. Normally, it's the opposite. Because privates, there's lots of them. And it's clear that this is just cannon fodder. But he says all the commanders will stay and defend, all of the privates will retreat, and they all die. The privates get saved, the officers die. And but that's the way we're trained. It's the only thing that we know how to do. I was once, when they came out with iPads and stuff like that, and I was training on this newfangled thing. It was many years ago. It was not something that you really understood. It wasn't intuitive. It's not that everybody had a touch screen and knew what they were doing. So they give me this thing and they say, okay, you gotta train using this. They'll leave your map and other stuff. They took everything away from me, so I just have that thing, so I'd be able to see if the thing works, and should we buy him or shouldn't buy him, all kinds of stuff like that. And so I had to look at this thing, which I wasn't used to doing. So I had 3 soldiers walk in front of me, because I can't look for the enemy and look at the screen at the same time. You can, either looking for the enemy or looking for the screen. Booby traps and stuff like that. And when the training was over, they ripped me a new one. And they said, you have to be first in line. I said, I can't be first in line. If you want me to look at the screen, I look at the screen, or I look at ahead of me. And they said, we don't care. You have to be first in line. That's all there is. You have to be first in line. And that memorial is built to commemorate those soldiers, NCOs, and officers, but as I said, an exorbitant amount of officers that the Israeli army keeps on losing. Because Israel is not the U.S. First of all, the U.S. doesn't fight on its own soil. But even if it did, the U.S. is huge. You got a huge army. You lose 1,000 tanks, you'll build another 1,000 tanks. We lose 1,000 tanks, we don't got any tanks. You lose 100 kilometers in Iraq, you'll get them back next week. The month later, it doesn't matter to you. We lose 100 kilometers, we're swimming next to Cyprus. We cannot lose. It simply is a non-option as far as we are concerned. And therefore, we have to motivate all of our troops. So therefore, they'll only see me from the back, because I'm always going to be in front of them. There is no such thing as in the Israeli army, charge. There's an order, follow me. We do not have an order for retreat. It doesn't exist in the Israeli vocabulary. There is no such thing as retreating. In the Israeli military vocabulary, what you're allowed to do is make a tactical maneuver backwards to regroup and attack. The word retreat simply is not part of our jargon. It doesn't exist. I'm not allowed to do that. Every mission you get, you have something that's called a red line. You die on that red line. You never go beyond. You never. No, and that's the way. That's the way it is. That's the only way. That's what we know how to do. Because of this, there's another thing that happens with us. I told you that the Israeli soldiers go home every other weekend. When they come back on Sundays, they are taken on what's called a cultural Sunday. They'll take them to a church, they'll take them to a mosque, they'll take them hiking someplace, they'll take them to an old people's house, an elderly person's house, and fix up the house. They'll do all kinds of stuff of that nature so that people will understand what they're fighting for. I feel so sorry for American troops that get sent off to Afghanistan. First of all, till they got sent there, they probably don't even know where the place is on the map, and they don't understand anything that's happening around them. They don't understand the cultures, they don't understand the people, they don't understand the food, they don't understand what's going on, they don't understand the language, everybody's walking around in dresses, they don't understand any of this crap. We can't afford that. Another thing about this, that we go home every weekend, I already told you, is that it's the saving grace of the Israeli army. You come home every other weekend, you get reacclimated to civilian life. You get to meet your girlfriend or your boyfriend. You eat real food. Now, the Israeli army, we all serve. My son was an officer in the special forces. He has a problem. He calls his dad. His dad's been a combat officer for 40 years. He doesn't want to talk to me. He talks to his uncle. He doesn't want to talk to the uncle. He talks to the kid down the street who probably served in the same unit. And even if he's meeting, or he just comes home every other weekend, and all the other buddies, whoever comes home that weekend, they sit around, they have a few beers, and they talk through stuff. And when we talk through stuff, we understand what we're talking about. When you say, oh yeah, last night we had a patrol and I walked the point and there was, through the, in the Jordan Valley, I know exactly what he's talking about. It's not a metaphor for me. It's not something that I have to try to envision. I know exactly what he felt. I know exactly what he was looking for. I know exactly what he was listening for. And this allows our soldiers to process things continuously. They don't have to go to some session. I don't know what the equivalent is of for soldiers like AA. But you don't have to do that because everybody around you has been through it. Not everybody, because not everybody's a combat soldier, but there's enough of them. There's lots of them, and they're in your family. And so for us, we have a much lower rate of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because first of all, we understand what we're fighting for. It makes sense to us. I was once chasing terrorists, and it was getting dark, so I'm not Joshua, so I couldn't call in the Lord in order to keep the sun standing over the hills of Givon and the moon over the valley of Ayalon. So I needed the Air Force to drop flares. And my son saw the flares from our back porch. Wow. To me, it is very clear what I'm fighting for. I don't get these guys, they get my kid. They're not going to get my kid. It's not going to happen. Not while I'm breathing. It's simply not going to happen. And so therefore, for us it's very clear. And even if something bad happens, I can talk to somebody about it. Yeah. And every other weekend, I get to go home. I get to be with my mom. I get to hug my girlfriend, and whatever. Lisa. If you think, you guys are all probably familiar with what happened in Abu Ghraib, right? The prison in Iraq, where the American soldiers who were administrating the prison there did some really despicable stuff. And you might ask how that happened, because I'm sure if the guys were sitting around in their home in Oregon and drinking beer, they would say they would never do that. But this is that thing of coming home every other weekend. You send the troops there; they're going to be there for half a year. So the original orders are you have to treat everybody with respect and so on and so forth. Well, that doesn't really work with when you're working with a bunch of hardened terrorists. Thank you, please, and will you mind doesn't work. So the first group of soldiers are going to be slapping these people around, right? Because that might work. When the second group, the new group comes in, they're already starting at slapping people around. By the time they're done with their half a year or year, they're going to be hitting people. Not slapping, they're going to be punching them out. By the time you get to the fourth group, they're going to be walking around with leashes around their necks. That's what happens. But we get to go home every other weekend. So we get reacclimated, and then you're at home. Don't do that. This is Jericho, folks. On our right-hand side is Jericho. And we're going to be going into Jericho in a moment because we have Raja says that I shouldn't scream so loudly because I have to guide. So we have Raja.